If you're doing B2B sales or lead generation and you're tired of manually hunting down LinkedIn profiles for every single lead you have, then this n8n workflow is exactly what you need. So, what this workflow does is it takes a simple list of names and companies from a Google Sheet, automatically finds their LinkedIn profiles, and then pulls their complete information. Now, let's walk through how this actually works, step by step. So, it all starts with a Google Sheets trigger. This is set up to watch a specific Google Sheet for new rows being added. Every time you add a new lead to that sheet with their name and company, the workflow kicks off automatically. You can see in the setup here it's polling every minute, which means it checks the sheet every minute for new data. So you could add 10 leads, walk away, grab some coffee, and when you come back, all their information is already enriched and ready to go. From there, the data flows into a split into batches node, and this is actually really important for scalability. What this does is it takes however many leads you added, let's say you added 50 leads, and it breaks them up into groups of 10. Why do we do this? Well, if you try to process too many API calls at once, you can run into rate limits or timeouts. Once we have our batches set up, the first API call happens with Linkfinder AI. This is the Find LinkedIn URL node. What happens here is pretty straightforward. For each lead in the batch, the workflow takes their full name and company name, combines them into a search query, and sends that to Linkfinder AI. So if your lead is John Smith at Microsoft, it's searching for John Smith Microsoft and finding the exact LinkedIn URL for that person. The API returns the direct link to their LinkedIn profile, which is exactly what we need for the next step. Now here's where it gets really powerful. Once we have the LinkedIn URL, that flows into the second Linkfinder AI node, which is Get Full Profile. This node takes that LinkedIn profile URL and does a deep dive. It scrapes all the public information from that LinkedIn page. All of that data comes back in a structured format that we can use for outreach or CRM import or whatever you need. You'll notice these two Linkfinder AI nodes are doing different things. The first one is using a service type called lead full name to LinkedIn URL. That's specifically designed to convert a name and company into a LinkedIn profile link. The second one is using LinkedIn profile to LinkedIn info, which takes that URL and extracts all the detailed information. So it's a two-step process. First, find the profile, then enrich the profile with all the data we actually care about. That final step is the aggregate all results node. This is where all those individual batches get combined back together into one big data set. So instead of having 5 separate outputs of 10 leads each, you get one clean output with all 50 fully enriched leads. This makes it way easier to export to a CSV, push to a CRM, or do whatever you need with. Now let's talk about how you actually get this set up yourself, because there are a few things you need to do before you can run this workflow. First, and most importantly, you need a Linkfinder AI API key. You'll head over to linkfindera.com and create an account. Once you're logged in, you'll go to your dashboard, and there should be an API section or settings area where copy that key because you're going to need it in multiple places. In the workflow, you'll see 2 Linkfinder AI nodes. Both of them have a header parameter called authorization where you need to paste your API key. The format is bearer space then your API key. So if your key is ABC123, you'd put bearer ABC123. You need to do this in both the Find LinkedIn URL node and the Get Full Profile node. If you don't set this up correctly, the API calls will just fail with an authentication error, so double check you've got the key in both places. You also need to connect your Google Sheets account to n8n. The Google Sheets trigger node has a credential section where you'll authenticate with your Google account. n8n will walk you through the OAuth flow, where you grant permission for n8n to access your sheets. Once that's connected, you'll select which specific Google Sheet you want to monitor. In this workflow, the trigger is watching a sheet called Lead to Find LinkedIn, and it's looking at the first Sheet tab inside that document. When you set up your Google Sheet, make sure it has at least 2 columns. One should be labeled Name and the other Company. That's what the workflow expects, so you'd have rows like John Smith in the Name column and Microsoft in the Company column, Jane Doe, and Apple, and so on. Every time you add a new row, the trigger picks it up and starts processing that lead. One thing to watch out for is the polling frequency. Right now it's set to check every minute. That's fine for testing in small volumes, but if you're adding hundreds of leads and you want faster processing, you could change that to every 30 seconds or even less. Now let's talk about the Linkfinder AI services themselves. There are different tiers and pricing models depending on how many leads you're processing. The free tier usually gives you a certain number of API calls per month, which is great for testing, but if you're running serious lead gen campaigns, you'll probably want to upgrade to a paid plan. Check their pricing page to see what makes sense for your volume. Good luck with your lead generation, and I'll see you in the next one.